Hi friends, welcome to GRANNYMASTER. So in this first module of 11th grade biology, we are going to discuss about the whole biology. In fact, yes, the living world. Biology is a science of life, isn't it? The living organisms. So before going into the depths of biology, we need to understand what is the living world that is around us. So in this particular lesson, we will deal with several criteria for classifying different things into living organisms or non-living things, and what are the factors which will actually decide whether a particular thing is a living thing or a non-living thing. So all these basic things we are going to learn in this particular lesson, and this is one of the introductory lesson to the entire biology chapters of your grade 11. So in this module, we will start with the general introduction on the living organisms or the living world, and what do you actually mean by the word living, and also what are the characteristics of living organisms. So these three topics will be covered in this module. We all know that science have got three branches: physics, chemistry, and biology. So all of you are learning all these three as different subjects. Now, biology, the term bio itself refers to life. So biology is a science of living organisms, or we can even say it as the science of life forms. And that includes even the living processes. Now, this science of living organisms and the processes involved in the maintenance of their life is what is comprising in biology. In your lower classes, you would have learned about living things and non-living things. Or in when you were in the higher grades, you would have learned about the biotic factors and abiotic factors of the environment. Now, why do we categorize them into these two groups? As we know, biotic factors, the living organisms, they have something peculiar that is not seen in the other things which are non-living or the abiotic factors. There are various factors influencing them. When we go deep into the living organisms, we will learn more about the morphology of the different organisms, the anatomy of the organisms, and even we learn about the physiological processes. And this is what is dealt in biology. And it is really interesting to learn all these and know the living world around us. To mention or to specify whether a given substance is living or non-living is going to be a difficult task if you don't know how to analyze it. Of course, we have some criteria for judging whether a particular substance given to you is belonging to the living category or the non-living category. So some of these factors include the growth, reproduction, response to stimuli, and there are various factors which affect or which comes into this criteria, but we are going to discuss about these major characteristics of living organisms, which is nothing but growth, response to stimuli, reproduction, and metabolism. So in this module we will talk in detail about these four characteristics of the living organisms, and let's see which one is actually going to determine whether the given organism or substance is living or non-living. So first, let's start with the characteristic growth. In lower classes, we would have learned that growth is a factor or a characteristic which determines the living organism. So growth can be of different types. Growth can happen if there is an increase in size of the object or increase in size of the organism, and that happens due to the increase in the number of cells, and also it can be measured as increase in mass. So if you could see, yeah, let's take human beings as an example. When you were a baby inside the mother's womb, you know how much small you were. And once you started going to your KG classes or the primary classes, you showed a little more increase in size, and that's when you say, okay, the child has grown. And then as you go to the higher level, you could see that there is a very peculiar visible growth seen in you, and that is because of the increase in size of your body parts. And this happens because of the continuous division of cells that happens in the body. And this because of the division of cells, there will be one single cell which can divide into two or many, and that's how the number of cells also increase, and consequently leading to the growth and increase in mass. So this point, increase in mass, this has equal weightage on a living organism as well as a non-living thing. If you could observe, yeah, of course, the same example, human beings. If you weigh a 3-year-old child and if you weigh a 13-year-old child, you can see that there is a mass or a weight difference. So obviously the one who has grown well will be of more mass. Same way, when we consider an example of a non-living thing, for example, maybe mountain, the size also increases as there are more number of trees growing up, or the more land area which is it is covering. So that is again an increase in size or increase in mass. So this growth is a characteristic which cannot actually determine whether a substance or whether an organism is certainly living or not, because you know growth is seen in living organisms as well as non-living things. So that is why we cannot conclude a growth as a specific factor for the characteristic of living organisms, because it is common for both living and non-living things. Though the external appearance of the growth is different, it is still there in both the categories. So growth in living organisms happen from inside. For example, we do have cell divisions, and the cell divisions will increase the number of cells, and that is something happening within your body or inside your body. So always remember, growth in living organisms, it is from the inside, whereas in a non-living thing it is from outside. So as I mentioned earlier, if there is a small hill and there are more number of trees getting added on as years go on, and then in that case you could see that the hill will turn out to be a mountain after so many years. So that is also a growth, that is also growth. But we cannot say that a mountain is a living thing or a hill is a living thing, right? That is why growth cannot be taken as a defining characteristic feature of the living organisms. And another thing, a living organism, once it is dead, it is not going to grow again. But that doesn't mean that is a non-living thing. If a human being, he have survived for a long time and then he die, the body, of course, it is not going to grow. And then that doesn't mean we are non-living things. Or even only up to a certain age, human beings also exhibit growth. So that doesn't mean once the growth stops, the individual has turned out to be a non-living thing. So this particular characteristic called growth cannot be specific in the case of this determining the organism to be living or non-living. So next one, we will go to the next characteristic, which is reproduction. So what do you mean by reproduction? Yes, the name itself says the production of progeny. The production of progeny possessing features more or less similar to those of parents. This is very important in the case of the definition of reproduction. Re is repeated. So the process of producing the young ones where they are more or less similar to their parents is considered to be reproduction. So this was considered to be a very important characteristic feature of living things. But again, there was a question which that there is a question that arises to your mind, maybe, what about a mule, or what about an infertile human being? Are they not living organism then? So this doubt led to the conclusion that reproduction also cannot be a certain factor which determines the living organism. So reproduction is also not a defining property of living organism, because in human beings also, or even in animals, there are animals or human beings who do not reproduce. And does that mean that they are not a living organism? No, in no way it is connected. And reproduction is not a necessary life process. We do have various life processes like respiration, nutrition, circulation, and excretion. So these four, they are the necessary life processes in our body. But reproduction is not at all a necessary process, because people who are not reproducing also survive, and they are also living organisms. So this is the reason why we say that reproduction is also not a defining property of living organisms. So what next? Yes, response to stimulus. Now this is something which is very very important characteristic feature of living things, because if you touch a stone, the stone or the rock is not going to respond to you. But if you touch, or if you do something on a living organism, sure, there will be a stimulus. Even sometimes, even if it is not visible to the naked eye, there's maybe some reactions happening inside within the body of the living organisms as well. So this response to stimulus is one of the peculiar characteristics that will determine the existence of living organisms. So what is response to stimulus? If there is any external trigger, like maybe a touch or maybe the temperature change, these are the external triggers, and for this external triggers, your body is going to respond. Now the best example which I could give you is touching a hot plate or touching a burning candle. What happens when you touch a hot plate? You will immediately retract your hands, right? So this is because you're responding to this stimulus called heat. Now, that is the case of animals or human beings. Now, what about plants? Do they show a visible response to stimulus? Of course, there is one very common example called touch me not plant, where you would have seen when you touch the leaf tip, or when you just touch any part of the plant, the leaves will shrink and the leaves will shed like this. So this is one response to stimuli which is seen in touch me not plant. And even the Venus flytrap or the insectivorous plants, they also respond to stimuli. For example, the Venus flytrap plant, if it is in the open condition, and if it have some prey, some insect or something entering inside, it will respond to the stimulus and immediately closes where the insect gets trapped. So these are some of the examples in plants, and these are some visible examples in plants. What about some invisible response to stimulus? Now, heat, temperature. So when there is a high temperature or high heat, the stomatal openings that you see on the leaf epidermis of the plants, they will close automatically. So that is a response to stimulus which is not very peculiar, or which is not visible to the naked eye, but still the plant is responding to the stimulus. So this is a very good characteristic of living organism. So consciousness therefore becomes the defining property of living organisms. So this is the first one which you can assure the specific defining property of a living organism. The next one is metabolism. What do you mean by metabolism? Of course, we do have so many metabolic activities happening in our body. So basically all the living organisms are made up of chemicals within. So there are biochemical reactions that happen in your body. For example, the simple life process, respiration. Respiration, once oxygen enters the body and reaches the different body cells, in the cellular level, there is a biochemical reaction happening. So the oxygen, it acts upon the glucose, or it breaks the glucose into carbon dioxide, water, and the ATP, which is the energy. So that is a biochemical reaction, a metabolic activity happening there, and that is how these chemicals react inside your body. So this metabolism also happens within a living organism. Even in plants, you can see various changes happening, like absorption of minerals. There is ion concentration difference, which enables the pull of water. So all these uh, are specific features that will determine the living organism. So this metabolism can be considered as a defining feature of all living organisms, and the cellular organization of the body is also a defining feature of life form, because from the unicellular organism like amoeba or bacteria to the higher level of organisms like animals, human beings, we have a level of organization: the cellular level of organization, tissue level of organization, then organ level of organization, organ system level of organization, and finally the organism, the multicellular organism. So this various levels of organization in the body of a living organism also is a defining feature of the life forms. So concluding this, these characteristic features which determine the living or non-living factors, considering all these characteristic features, we know that the cellular organization, metabolism, and response to stimuli are the defining features of living organisms, whereas growth and reproduction, we cannot conclude them as a defining feature of living organisms, being the reason that growth can happen in both living as well as non-living organisms, and reproduction is a process which is actually not a mandatory process in a living organism, because there are sterile human beings, there are sterile animals which do not actually reproduce, but still they survive. So in that case, we cannot define the reproduction as a defining feature of living organism. So this is the overall general introduction of the lesson, where just the characteristic features which determine whether a substance is a living organism or non-living thing is done. So in the upcoming modules, we will be learning about the different criteria for classifying different organisms, and taxonomy, then various taxonomical aids. All these things we are going to cover up in this lesson. So wait and watch the remaining modules. Thank you so much.